If you want to do something aesthetic driven, you're only going to resonate with a small amount of people, or it's going to be too mainstream to be interesting to you as a designer. But then at the same time, it's a showcase where I look at it like I do just as much, if not more, revenue in work related to that, where people will hire me to design their merchandise collection or to fix something else because they saw that work that happens. But it's like really thinking through what that opportunity looks like. 1,000 videos kind of gets you anywhere you want in life. You want a massive change in your life, like look 1,000 days down the line. But people are always looking at, because virality, we're so obsessed with virality, people are always looking at like, oh, I can change my life like tomorrow. But when you really look at like the consistency of getting, slowly building your way up to 5,000 or 10,000 views in your niche over the course of 2.5 years will like also radically shift like where your life is.
Oren, thanks so much for coming. I'm sure all of you know Oren as the internet's creative director, but Oren, provide some color. Like, give us some background. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, perfect. So I started my career actually here in New York as a designer, not too far from here at an agency, and then got into marketing in like big retail brands in outdoors and consumer electronics, and then eventually over time, a few years ago, became a creator because, as I think many of you know, there's just not a lot of good resources and blueprints for anyone doing creative work in the modern era. There just isn't that same training and best practices that existed before. And that went really well. And so now have a number of businesses and endeavors and make that content and then work with Lucas and team on some of this as well.
I think we got some of that content in here. So I'm sure many of you have seen Oren's IG, TikTok content. He's one of the best in the biz, especially related to creative. And then also, we've been working together on Valuables, his business. Do you want to tell everyone about Valuables?
Sure, and I wish for everybody that you never have to look at your own like thumbnail of your face, like large on a screen.
Let's go back.
Perfect. Let's bring that. That's good. The headshot I'll take.
Wow, look at that one.
All right. Here we are. So the brand that I'm working on with Lucas, so I started the brand as a creator, but it's a little bit different, right? As many of you know, I make value content. I make content to educate people about marketing and brand strategy. So it's a lot different than like buy my merch or some really particular thing that really ties into my audience, because my audience is like very universal. But I've been doing that because like as a creative, you want to make things, you want to have a platform to try things. One of the best parts of being a creator is you now have the ability to like test and validate things in no other way. And so I've made the decision to say, hey, I want to create something that maybe I make the same things now as I do 10 years from now. Maybe it's different, but I want to have that vehicle and like begin a journey that way, which is a little different than how most people approach brands. And Lucas and I talk a lot about creator brands and do founders need to be creators and what being a creator means in terms of what it allows you to do inside of a business. And we thought we'd take some of those conversations into what we talk about today.
Yeah. And just for notice, how many people here are like creators just by show of hands? Like they're creating content pretty consistently. And then it's about half of us. And then entrepreneurs, like you have a business. All right. So most of the creators are entrepreneurs as well. Basically, that's what I'm learning. Awesome. Well, this one is really for you. That's what we're going to talk about. And then the other plug that we have is just Hyper.
Oh, yeah. So I'm here with, if any of you know Clayton, who runs Sprezza, he's floating around here somewhere. So we have a newsletter together on brand strategy. So we've been here filming all week, but that's kind of the core things that I work on is obviously content, some of these other businesses, and then Valuable in the newsletter. Okay.
So I think you obviously had a lot of depth there. How'd you become a creator?
So I became a creator because I was a senior. I was SVP of marketing at like a toy company, and I had been a president of a company prior. I was very operational. I ran sales. I ran distribution. I was dealing with trucking. I was dealing with like retail. And I decided I never wanted to do that again. I wanted to go back to marketing. I was passionate about that, as many of other creative people are. That's like a good vehicle for me in my career. And I realized that my expertise, which was all paid ads, retail support, like wasn't useful. And that everything was happening on TikTok and Instagram, and I didn't understand it, and so I decided to, hey, maybe I'll try to create it. And I created a lot of bad content. My first videos were about, shout out to my friend Nate Rosen who's here, who probably like is in deep on this. He makes good versions of the content I tried to make. I was like reviewing non-alcoholic drinks, and I was like trying to talk about CPG brands, and it just didn't really work. And then I started talking a lot more about like luxury items and brands I want to buy and brand experiences, and that caught on. But like I made maybe 100 terrible videos on TikTok before that like clicked. And I thought initially that would be great for me to be able to say, cool, I can now better manage a marketing team. which is a great value of being a creator when so much is now content. But then it became much bigger than that because there was kind of like an obvious need for voices with experience like in this niche and area to actually share like inside this creative divide, like things that are happening in branding. And then I started to take that much more seriously and then apply that to a lot of businesses as well.
And then more recently, when did you start Valuables in that journey?
About 6 months ago. So I left my job about 6 months ago to do content and other things kind of full time. And then I wanted to start a brand as an extension of that, more just as like, I'm a partner, as some of you may know and some may not, in a women's wear brand and another brand, but they're not like right to share content about. They don't like have overlap with my audience. And so I wanted to have something I could like build and talk about that was a vehicle like just for me, which is actually kind of a interesting experience. Like when you become a creator, is like there's these expectations that, hey, next year you're going to start the next $10 million deodorant brand or whatever it is. But I look at it as like, especially if you want to build in the luxury space or you want to build things that mean a lot to you or develop yourself as a designer, your business is like, it's like a family business. It's like, hey, it's something you want to have pass on like to another generation, or you want to think about over this really long time frame. And I said, okay, well, I'd rather start and run that and see what happens and start that journey now than like plan out whatever the perfect application of that looks like.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier today, actually, just like the importance of thinking about your business on a long enough time horizon where you're like not rushing. I think a lot of people can get like caught in the mess of, needing to fundraise or needing to hit a certain sales target. And it makes you make decisions that aren't necessarily good for the long term of the business. One of the things I've really respected about the way you've approached Valuable is like, it's almost like a canvas for you to kind of experiment. And that gives you so much more creative freedom.
Yeah. And I guess I've always been obsessed with that concept of product market fit. And so in this women's wear brand I've worked on for years, we've had like two crucial moments in what we've done. And one of them was like we had like a viral product. We've never been very good at organic social. It's been a very meta ads and retail driven brand. But we had a product that was like flying off the shelves. Now we've had a few more of that have happened consistently from it. And you just see that power of something greater than yourself. And one of the hard parts when you're a creator is you never know, do people like this because they like me? Or do they like it because they actually like the product and the brand? And so when I look at it as if you're developing things, if you have the resources to it, like your goal is to chase down what do these products have like any level of natural velocity? What resonates better than me just putting something on a shelf? And what I like at least about, I look at the ups and downs of having a really wide audience and look at, okay, well, one of the pluses is if something does take off any more than the others, like it's because there's so many opportunities to test things and kind of want to lead into that.
Yeah. And just for the audience here, we're going to cycle through questions. We crowdsourced a bunch of questions just through Instagram. So we'll hit a bunch of those, but like this is definitely meant to be open format. So we'll have space at the end for questions directly. So I guess for the folks that haven't really started yet building, they're creators, they're making content, where do you start? Where do you start when building a brand? Like, what are the steps?
So one thing I've been encouraging a lot of people to do now is really think through like the why do I want to start? Where do I want to start? Because I get a lot of people will hit me up because I've made fashion content about fashion content. And I say, hey, like actually go work at a fashion brand for like 2 years and then decide if you really want to start one. Because I'd say 75% of people are like, oh, okay, I never actually want to do that. So that's one I do encourage is that like, working in the niche that you want to build in. And I know a lot of the more successful founders I've met have done that. They've said, hey, I was working at this large pharmaceutical brand or whatever. I saw an opportunity. I have this relationship. I know the buyer at this retail store. They're very well set up for that. So I say like that foundation of where you are in life is actually like pretty important. And even if you go a level down in your job or end up in some place you wouldn't expect, like getting in that industry is really useful. And the other thing is I do think that like you don't have to be a creator to found a company, but I do think it's exceptionally useful to break that, to cross the seal, make content about that journey or about your niche, and then you will know a lot about yourself in that. You'll basically, because you're going to be the only person helping you start this business, unless you raise a lot of money that will have even more pressure. But if you say, hey, I can consistently commit to this 2 videos a week or whatever it is to help tell my story, and then I can actually see I'm willing to go sell the thing that I'm creating. I'm willing to go out there and say, hey, buy this thing. Like I believe in it and make content that people believe back. Once you've like proven that to yourself, I think there's the only thing between you and success is just like time and finding the right product, because you can continue to do that yourself or you can help enable other people to do it. And a conversation that Lucas and I have a lot is that idea that like right now, if you have a small company, you need to create so many creative assets. You need amazing emails, you need amazing ads, your website needs to be amazing, your campaigns need to be amazing, your organic social. And your first hires are probably not going to be like creative strategists. And so if you are a founder who has that in mind, I feel like that's one of the new, like most crucial toolkits is the ability to jump in there and be like, you know what, I just made the UGC ads. And you'll see huge companies do this. I know Sean from Ridge like still is in like a bunch of their ads. And then also say, hey, I need to pick up the slack. I can brief this. Like I can describe this brand vision. I know what it takes to work on social is something that I would just think is a fantastic setup so that whenever you do have that right product, you are equipped to actually act on it versus being like, oh, now I got to go figure out marketing or I got to pay a bunch of money to get this in front of people.
Yeah. I don't want to go and say it's like a prerequisite now for founders to like be proficient in content creation language, but it's definitely like an accelerant to success. Like I think if you understand the content game, if you're making things consistently as a founder and like you're sub $10 million in revenue, it helps so much.
We also get your sales pitch locked. Like something I think about a lot is before I started making videos, I was pretty introverted. I was very good at like math and analytical things. I could organize things well. I could run teams well, but I never really wanted to speak in the meeting. I didn't want to give the sales pitch. But now my entire life, I think in like hooks, bullet points, and like a wrap up. And I remember having that happen. Like I was in meetings with Costco at the last brand I was with, and I'm like pitching. And like I'm doing it the way I do a video, and that's coming natural. And it's like, if you've ever felt like I'm not a salesperson, oh, how would I do that? How am I going to have the meeting with that? Like, I don't know, 10 or so good videos in, and you'll start to be a lot more confident.
You don't strike me as introverted.
You would laugh. If you saw me maybe 5 years ago or we met, you would laugh.
So what's the tipping point for you? I guess like using your own experience, like idea turns into a brand. Coming from the creator side, maybe.
Well, like the hardest part for anybody, and I was just talking to someone in the audience about this too, is you just have to go down that entire checklist of like these 100 things that have to exist before your idea comes into reality. And I think that at least now that idea that if you have, even if it's your 500 LinkedIn connections or this 1,000 people that followed me on TikTok, just like getting anyone else excited, I feel like is the tipping point. If anyone is like, hey, that's a thing, I'll join your email list. Like I'll sign up to be the first person to pre-order it. I'll do whatever. That like initial customer validation is that point. Because you can have as many ideas as you want, build whatever, but like getting someone to buy into it is huge.
I would agree with that. Okay, so we have a whole segment here about like, we got all of these questions. Do I need to be a creator to start a brand? No, you don't need to be. But I think there's a really interesting relationship between like entrepreneurs who are becoming creators and then creators who want to become entrepreneurs. We talked about that segment earlier.
Yeah, I'd be curious for you to kind of chip in a bit on that. I mean, we talked about it. You had some pretty concrete thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, it's not a prerequisite as an entrepreneur, but it just like, it helps so much if you're creating content. For me, I was always a builder, like just in the weeds company, very operations focused. And now last 12 months, it's like you have to, the benefits of creating content are just so obvious. But I think on the opposite end of the spectrum, like if you're a creator, you don't necessarily need to become an entrepreneur. Like being a creator is a full-time job, and there are pros and cons of that.
There are a lot of pros and cons. And I talk about this. I've dealt with this myself, and I know a lot of other creators that have, because look, being an influencer or a creator is kind of an easy business. You post a video, you get an outsized amount of money. And then you start to weigh how hard that is versus bringing any idea into the world, which is like extremely hard. And a lot of people will be like, oh man, I'm just going to go back to, like posting this skincare. And it is what it is. They might be right. And so it's really thinking about what that looks like. But I want to go back to Darkroom and their business here. So Lucas and then his partner Jackson make content in a number of different ways. Jackson makes a lot of content, but they run a pretty large agency, right? 85 people or so, right? And are using that as a primary source of communication, where it's gone like kind of that opposite way, like entrepreneur, like into creator. But there's a lot of businesses that are easier than physical products, and especially now where there's, so many like, oh, this new drink brand, this new whatever, this new X, this new fashion brand, everyone's using the same Instagram stuff. That I do think that like, that hybrid idea that, all right, we're either doing services and then we use some of that momentum to eventually like find the niche we want to go into product, or like we look at any kind of thing. I don't think starting a brand that just like has to be like so focused on product as it is. I think like this next generation of agencies is born out of, are either going to grow or survive from embracing content really in depth, or they're going to be started from like the platform of that.
Yeah, for me, it came down to like, what is the competitive set doing? For agencies, like everyone here probably knows like the big agency names, like the Ogilvies, the Wyden and Kennedys. Like you look at the type of marketing that they do, none of them market like a consumer business. So for me, like that's the opportunity to take, a lot of the creator consumer mindset to B2B to agency. For you, it might be different, but I would urge you to look at like, who are you up against? What is your competition doing? What are the opportunities there? When I think about growth, though, ultimately, like everyone wants to grow. It's a question of distribution. I think creators have an unfair advantage because they have distribution. You have people watching what you're doing, so you have a natural avenue to, offer some sort of product that's related to your expertise. The question is, what is that product? Is it a digital product, a physical product, a B2B agency? There are other types of business models that you can offer. So I think you just need to think about like, what's at the end of the funnel for my audience? Oren and I were talking about it. It's like, what's the overlap with valuable with your audience? It's probably pretty small.
It's small, but it's a showcase as well. Like, so that's where I think about it, where like, if you want to do something aesthetic driven, and as a designer, I'm always going to do something like aesthetic driven, you're only going to resonate with a small amount of people, or it's going to be too mainstream to be interesting to you as a designer. And it's kind of like a bit of a paradox. But then at the same time, it's a showcase where I look at it like I do just as much, if not more, revenue in work related to that, where people will hire me to design their merchandise collection or to fix something else because they saw that work that happens, that makes sense for me as a creator and as a business to be able to kind of do both at the same time. At some time it may not, but it's like really thinking through what that opportunity looks like. And I will say, like, as people talk about creator businesses in general, it really helps at that beginning part. Selling your first 20 units, your first 100 units, validating an idea, getting in people's heads. But it doesn't solve any of the back curve. And that's usually where people fall off, is they go, oh, I actually have to run this business and do all this creation at the same time. And we're all like already overwhelmed enough as it is, that it's just like knowing what you're signing up for, like in that long-term sprint.
Yeah, this is why partnerships are born too. So if you are a great creator, there's opportunities for partnerships there if you're really set on creating a product, or, you have something to offer your audience. So can you talk about the benefits of, we kind of touched on this, but more specifically, like, how has your personal brand really benefited, like, the business side of Oren? Yeah,
well, actually, and I'll take a step back to like when I was still working and growing on social media, where I would notice that I'd be meeting with retailers and like they'd have people join the meeting because they had people that liked my content on their team. And I'd never had like any level of power dynamic ever in my life. Like everything was always like, I never had any advantage like that way. And I was like, oh, this is like a thing. And that changes the dynamic of how you're pitching someone you're trying to sell to. And then same thing when you're inside of a business. And I think for younger people, this is really resonant, is like, if you want to be moving up in a career, if you're the one person at that job who has that 100,000 followers, like who do you think is going to be like, well, what should we do on social media? That's a really powerful tool. And goes no matter where you are in your career. But so many people are desperate for those answers. They don't have those people that connect the dots. And if you are that person, I think there's a huge advantage there. It's just people don't understand what to do with it. Like, and companies don't really know how to handle people that like then are telling that story, and is HR do it, is whatever. And one anecdote I like to use a lot is that everyone has a really hard time when they make content at the first job they start making content at, because it's a new thing for people and they're uncovering, everyone else is figuring it out. But then the second job that you're at, where that already exists, goes way better, because all of a sudden you have significantly more leverage, and when you walk into it, people already know kind of what they're signing up for, and then you begin to like see how these two things work together in your career. And like, this is a new, this kind of personal brand era is like very like the last few years. Like, okay, we had Gary Vee talking about it like 10 years ago, but the real practical reality of so many people in this room being like, this is a part of my life is brand new, and there's no kind of roadmap for it. And so I think like learning and working through that is one of the more interesting things that we get to think about.
Yeah, there are no rules. You can kind of design and carve your own path. I do kind of agree with you though. The skill set is so valuable to companies today. So I think if you're creating and you're figuring out how to resonate with your audience, like you just have so much leverage.
Yeah, and if you have a bigger brand, if you're obsessed with content, like I'm an obsessive person, I like to like study the game of whatever it is that I'm doing. But I come into a lot of these scenarios where I'll work with like bigger brands. And it's just like, if you have that checklist of like, hey, all of our YouTube shorts are related videos for the long form YouTube video. And hey, we have a broadcast channel. We haven't started it yet on Instagram, but I know it sends a notification to every follower, and we have 400,000 followers, so we should actually use that to anchor something. If you've thought through all these things that if you're native to social media, you kind of know, but brands just aren't putting that same thing on there. I was having a conversation with my friend Jason, who was here beforehand, about, he was an art director at Amazon, And he was saying when he learned how to make content and he started to think of his campaigns with like hooks, like that was like a wake-up moment for him where he was like, oh, I hadn't structured it like this. I hadn't realized I should catch attention like that. But he's now applying that framework to how people actually think about imagery in like the job of an art director. And I think that like all those concepts, if you understand them, are so important in application, whether you're working at a business or starting your own.
Can you talk about the negative side maybe of being a creator and trying to launch?
Yeah, it's trying to do too much. And then also like you're then shifting the dynamic of like, you're asking your audience to like fiscally support you, right? And like, why would they want to do that? And are they okay with that? Or are they going to see that in the feed every week and be like, all right, I'm less likely to follow this person. There's trade-offs to like any number of those things. And that's why creators have a really natural fit. Like I look at Marcus from Minted, who's like his content and his Venn diagram of what he's building are like a circle. It's a perfect alignment of like of that those things happening, but you really have to weigh that because I'll see people that will be like, I'm not making enough sales. I need to post this way more. My followers don't like that. You have to find that balance and have a plan for it. Is significant. And then the time is the biggest thing. Like I see this, I do too many things. And I'm okay with that, but like you have to know that ahead of time. It's never going to be where you want it to be if you're not dedicated in that way.
I guess there's two things there I want to touch on. Illustrate quickly like the content schedule because I think that'd be valuable for people here.
So like I put out a video every day on short form. Let's say average like 6 days a week. I do 2 long form videos. The YouTubes every week, and let's say those average like 6 a month. I was also doing that cadence. I did 1 short form a day while I was working, like as well. But then if you're a brand and you add on to that you want to be, I don't think you need to post every day, but say you're going like 3 times a week, but you're adding in your ad variations or whatever, then you're starting to get to 15 pieces of content every week, which is like pretty significant. And that will burn people out. But what your responsibility is as a person who knows that is to systematize this. And again, we're in this world where like someone like, who works in your position, you build SOPs and processes to make content and to do creative briefs. And there's so few people who like are in the smaller brand world or in the creator world that have gone and made processes around making good content. That's another big bucket I think can be filled. I actually love to learn talk to people a little bit about like how you guys have done that in terms of you turn out how many creative assets like a week?
Yeah, I mean,
10,000?
Thousands of creative assets. But I think it's different when you're like creating for yourself versus like for a brand. Like what we're executing on is like ad assets, videos, statics, GIFs, emails. Like there's a lot of repetition and, I think system to that velocity. When you're trying to come up with, ideas, like be a thought leader, I think there's some creative energy that you really need to dedicate to it that a framework might not necessarily like give you the most.
But something I love to talk about, I think is really important for everyone who is even tangentially related to content to understand is the idea of like the content funnel, where it's like, hey, I'm going to make content that is getting people in the top of this, that gets people just to notice me and excite me, that may not reach all of my goals, but like gets people to view it. Because if you look at how like algorithms work or how Instagram works, et cetera, if you get that 1 million view video one time, your next videos are going to be shown to more of those people that like had that first experience. And so being able to to do that, even if it doesn't achieve your goal, because everyone's always like, I need to make content that drives sales or achieves this or that. Like level 1 awareness is a huge thing to think about as a creator or as a brand, that even if this isn't perfect for me, it's getting that attention. But then level 2, which is like the majority of people's content typically, is, okay, I want to achieve my objectives. I want to talk about the things I'm good at talking about. I want to build rapport. And then the bottom of the funnel is like achieving your exact goals. Because I'll also see a lot of brands or creators who are like, I don't want to post a video where I ask everyone to buy because it's going to flop. I'm like, well, if you never do that, even if you get 4,000 people to view that video and you had 10,000 like on your average, like that's not a loss. That's those people being specifically buying into that thing you want. And everyone will be like, oh, well, if I post something bad, is it going to ruin my account or flop forever? Like the answer is absolutely not. Like you can always come back. And I think people need to remember that content is there to achieve your goals. These social accounts are there to achieve your goals. And you just have to layer those things, in terms of like those 3 types, like into your content is a really important thing to consider.
Yeah, it's a consistency basically. In terms of, I'm curious for you, like what was the tipping point where you started to introduce like either offers or products or like ask from the audience? It's interesting. When I started doing brand deals like pretty early, and I didn't get good at them for a while. That's the other thing too, is when you're doing content, like it still has to drive value. Like a brand will want an influencer to read something like off a sheet or talk about their thing. My new format that I've been doing for the last few months, it's worked much better, is I'll be like, hey, I will talk about your thing, but first I'm going to talk about what I think is most important in that space. So like for instance,
like I have one I'm working on influencer marketing, where I'm literally like, here's the most important things I think are literally happening in influencer marketing right now. And then the back half is, if you want to do that, here's the software that helps. But if you lead with the software, like no one cares. They scroll away. And so you have your growth as a creator, and then you have okay, now I'm asking people for stuff. Okay, now I'm asking people for stuff that's actually good. But then other than that, I kind of gradually phase it in over time, but I don't like to bang people over the head with buy this thing.
Yeah, with offers.
But there are creators that do really well. I think it comes down to that diagram, right? If I was selling marketing software, I would probably be hitting it every day, but I'm not. And so I'd rather like keep it to where I think it's tasteful.
When launching a business, how do you leverage or think about Amazon or marketplaces?
So my background is in like retail sales and stuff, and I actually highly encourage people to think way above DTC, like from the beginning. In fact, if you are selling anything, I would go find one retail store of any type, like a small one preferably, to actually like have a relationship with the buyer. Like go walk into those stores, find out how they buy products, find out if you can go like, hey, can I sell next to the counter? Okay, well, you won't let me do it now. What would you let me do? If I get 10,000 views on a video shouting out your store, will you let me come now? And like actually begin to understand what their sales process is like. Because I just think that building retail and D2C together is like drastically important. And Amazon's really important when I think about anyone that has success on TikTok. And something that my friend Rob and I and another friend I have who like really are focused on Amazon talk a lot about is the average TikTok viewer, when they go search for a product after, there's a split depending on who your consumer is. Let's say 30% or 40% of those people don't go to the website. They just go search on Amazon because that's where they buy. And so if you're missing on that, then you're basically missing where they actually engage and sell. And Amazon's really daunting for smaller brands and may not necessarily be worth your time. But at a certain amount of time, when you have a bunch of influencers, when you're consistently getting high views, you're just not reaching enough people. And I also say for social content, a conversation I've had many times and I pitched for a lot of brands is when you go to Walmart, when you go to like more down chain, you go to Sprouts or you go to REI or whatever it is, if you can go to them and be like, here's my TikTok information as a creator, here's ours as a brand, here's my top 2 influencer posts. Hey, our top areas are like we got Fargo, North Dakota, we are huge there. And Miami and Arkansas and Alabama, we are huge there. And I see you have these stores in these regions, but like look at these numbers we have. I'd love to be able to kick off a program like inside these key places, and we're going to generate social and do that with you. Like that conversation that you can have as like a creator or someone socially savvy to get into retail is such a better value proposition to be able to show them there's this unmet demand for your product and that you can generate it in key areas that any traditional brand is coming with. And so if there is an opportunity to like add something new on the shelf or move space, you have an extremely distinct advantage for that. I did this on a campaign I worked on the SEO for with my friend Matt has a brand called Chlorophyll Water, and this was his like master plan was I'm going to get 1 billion hashtags on TikTok or 1 billion views on the hashtag, and then I'm going to go to retail. And I've like never seen someone get adopted at retail faster than when he was like, I don't ship this beverage, it's heavy. Only so many people are going to buy it like that. But the demand is there. Like, put this on your shelf, and it works.
Well, I mean, that's the big hurdle with retail, too. Like, once you're in and on shelf, like, you need to have sell-through. So if you have the geographic density, like, and you feel confident that people are going to go out and actually buy or at least know the product when they're at the store, that's everything. So I think your point about packaging, like, data for retailers is very well taken. The other thing I'd say about this is, like, I'm starting to see a lot more brands that just exclusively are launching on Amazon or just leveraging the logistics network. I think you're going to see the same thing with TikTok Shop. We'll see what happens there, but that's where I was heading.
Well, I'm curious, put it back to you. You help brands launch on Amazon. What's the right point to do that? What do you have to think about to get into it?
I think it's dependent. It's dependent on the category. Like if you're beverage, I could see you making a case for launching exclusively on Amazon if you want to have a big e-commerce business and you're not going to be in retail because you don't have the relationships or MOQs or whatever. That's just because of a dimensional weight thing. Like D2C for beverage, doesn't really make unit economical sense, but for Amazon it does because you can fulfill through Amazon. I'm starting to see more brands spend a lot more time on Amazon because of the categorical thing. I think if you're launching a creator business, though, there's still a lot of weight on direct to consumer, and I think that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. But I do think having those retail partners from the start, like even now, I'm going into this next things I'm releasing, like with One Boutique. Like there's like a few of those where it's like having that, just beginning that presence. Because again, the earlier you have that one relationship that will vouch for you for when you go to bigger retail, you're like, oh yeah, these people work with me super closely. I did X amount of sell-through. You're just really saving yourself some time and energy later. And I'm like, all the big brands I've worked at, all have like massive retail. Like it does so much more for D2C, and you're not stuck in like the necessarily like the meta game all the time. It's part of your job, not your entire job. There's some peace of mind there. And I do think for anyone telling an interesting story or really solving a consumer problem with their product or an underserved niche, that like getting it into the store should be a bigger priority.
For sure. We're seeing that more and more on CPG. I will also say, just like on the retail side, like we talk about luxury a lot. If you're in accessories, if you're in apparel, like Halo retailers cannot be understated.
And so if for those that don't know, what it was a Halo retailer?
Oh yeah, like retailers that basically hold a lot of water, like in the zeitgeist, and like, you know, like a Dover Street Market.
Yeah, exactly. So if you get to somewhere and your brand is placed next to a bunch of other premium brands in there, that is a massive thing for you. That's funny. Yeah, I had someone describe their brand to me last night by what the store they're carried at with like who else is there. So touche.
It's a brand association, basically. How do you leverage, like, how do you think about organic versus paid? I know you've started running ads.
So like I love paid advertising, but like as an organic creator, like I think validating ideas is awesome with organic content. Building up to a launch, like debuting a campaign, like telling the story of building your brand. But then you just need way more assets. And so to give some context, like I'll be in accounts for some of these brands. Like I worked with an iPhone case brand that's running like a good 7,000 meta creatives. Like at any time, like there's so much creative running, and they're like multi-language and like all this other stuff. But there are a lot of brands where to actually reach the full potential of meta, where you're doing 7 figures, 8 figures a month on it, you're running like 1,000 creatives. And as a creator brand, you just sort of think of what it looks like when I get there. But one thing I know is like I'm running a bunch of ads for my brand right now. There is every single one of those, the highest performer is me whitelisted on my account. Like it just is what it is, like as a reel. And it's funny because it's completely different than some of the other brands I work with. But your ability to say, I'm going to go test that, I'm going to take my performing piece of content and move it is huge. And what people underestimate on that when you're running meta ads is if you run an ad from a start and it's not one of your organic posts that's then gone, or it's not something whitelisted, it starts with 0 engagement, 0 comments, whatever. But if I post something, and even if it has something low as 1,000 likes or 10 comments, starting an ad from there is like, and running that as an ad where it already has those people like commenting positively or working on it is such a massive perception shift for the person being served the ad versus it isn't. And it's little things like that like may sound like common sense, but people don't think a lot about, and I think really works as a creator, and why they should be pushing it like indefinitely, like be involved in that process. I think why you see people like Hailey Bieber is constantly in the front of her campaigns, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tale as old as time there with celebrity. I think you mentioned something really interesting that we talk a lot about at the agency, which is like the organic to paid flywheel, like that funnel of like how you're, testing new creatives through the organic channel. You don't need to put any spend behind it. You kind of validate, then you integrate those assets into paid. I think that makes a lot of sense for brands today. Are you doing that?
Yeah, 100%. I've been doing that at a small scale. Like we're not spending tons of money on Meta. We're spending, $100 a day type stuff on Meta, not like thousands of dollars a day. But that's the entire idea, is like post it if it's good, run it, whitelist as an ad. And then it's the same thing when you get into TikTok Shop and affiliate, right? Where it's like anytime anything does decent, like you put as much Spark ad dollars behind it as you can.
Are creators, we got this question, it was interesting. Are creators better suited for starting service businesses or product businesses, which we touched on a little bit?
If you've never worked seriously at a product business before, then I would definitely start with a service business. And you made this matrix of like how hard or easy things are. But I look at it like product business, there's so much logistics around shipping, sizing, packaging, like all the things that come with that if you don't have the experience to know what that pain looks like or going into retail, like sell services first, get used to like accounting and back and forth and giving your clients what they want, establish some level of cash flow, and like then think about it more. That's just kind of like some base level advice.
We put this together in 5 minutes, so keep us honest on it. But
if you want to call out what you think Lucas got wrong, I can understand.
Like, oh God. But no, I think you should really spend a lot of time thinking about each of these because there are implications for each. Like I think a lot of creators want to gravitate towards physical products. It's tactile, it's cool. Like there's a lot of brands, CPG is fun. To like get a CPG business lifted, like it requires a lot of investment in inventory. It's just a fact. We were talking about digital product.
Yeah. Digital product is wonderful. There's just connotations of it, right? Like, but I think, and we're also now in this really rapidly changing world of software. No, but like, so I say like, so people will be like, hey, this person sells courses, or this person does like X or Y, and like, what does that mean? And like, there's like influencer and guru and like all the kind of things that come with that. And so you get it in the back of a lot of creators' heads that like, and so I look at that, if you are driving like massive value and you are like, we're willing to like die on the sword of, I'm going to make sure this works for these people, that's great. Most people aren't willing to do that, right? And so I don't think it's a space for them. Like that may end up badly. And that's why I like the service end of it, and that you kind of have to learn more about yourself, improve how you engage with people, and then you can kind of work on things from there. And look, some of the toy brand that I worked at spun out of an agency I used to run with 2 other people. It's about a 40-person agency we built, and we devoted time to launching our own products. And several of them didn't make it anywhere. One of them made it to a much bigger brand than our agency ever was, and it was an internal R&D thing where we were saying, we don't always want to keep doing services for people. We want to throw some of these shots on goal, and one of them worked really well.
Yeah, on the flip side of that was the impetus with Darkroom, or like, hey, we're going to grow businesses. We'll launch a couple of our own. Those were not successful, so we had the opposite end of
You have the vehicle to do it, to say, hey, it doesn't matter if we spent $50K on this experiment because we built a big enough business where it's worth it for us to go validate these ideas.
Yeah, I think it just depends where you're at on your journey and like the expertise you have and like, how you can add value to your audience. Like, can you deliver a course and feel really good about that? Or can you, leverage an audience to deliver some sort of service? For me, it's going to be like at the end of the funnel, Darkroom has, tons of different digital marketing services, and we help, entrepreneurs grow their business. For you, it's valuable. It's also all the other, different products and services that you work across.
It's too many things.
It's a million things. So what makes a creator-led brand different from an influencer brand?
And so this is something interesting where, so creators are people in my mind that document things with value. They'll say, hey, I'm trying to teach people. I'm trying to show people how things work in the world. Whereas an influencer is a little more based on personality. And I'm following this person because I aspire to be like them or look like them or like or enjoy their lifestyle. It's kind of like a split and a divide there, which is kind of very different in my mind. Because if you're a value-driven person, you have to understand that your resonance, people aren't just going to buy stuff because they like you. Like you have to have way more of a product fit. Your more of a skill set is like you can use it slightly to kick things off. And I'm squarely in this bucket, like as a creator. Versus if you're an influencer and people are like, hey, I will do anything this person does because I really like the things that they do. I want to be like them. I follow them for this other specific reason. And there's influencers in like all different categories, right? Like from a male, female, age, whatever it is. Like then you have much more of a resonance to get some initial things locked in. But then your ability to scale that, like you may get like a false sense of security that, oh, this thing is really good. When in reality, you just have a really strong resonance with your audience.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then take that a step further with like celebs, like.
Yeah, well, celeb brands is the most interesting. Like, 'cause I look at when I talk about like really successful creators, celeb brands. Like one of the examples I think is the best is Goodles from like Gal Gadot, which is like an actual excellent product that like for people with kids. For people who don't know, it's like high protein pasta basically that's at like every health food store that you would probably buy without her being related to it at all, but would not be in all these chains and stores like without her in that. And so I think with celebs now, they're less resonant than ever. I think people care less than ever. But again, if you have a great idea, like actual product market fit, the accelerant that comes with like that fame or that reach is massive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's like less of a, people like see the veneer now on celebrity brands where it sometimes can come off a bit.
Well, you see it too. Like, how many emails a week do you think you have of like celebrity brands being like, "Hey, we really want to launch on X or Y"?
I mean, we just take tequila. Like, that's all you have to look at. How does your creator voice differ from your brand voice?
Yeah, and so for instance, for me, I'm building something that's like tangential but like very different, right?
Your day voice versus your night voice.
Yeah, but I feel like your brands need to be able to stand on their own. Like, and even if you need to be able to like develop that exercise like almost separately. And I feel like most people should have that pretty different. I didn't think about that question prior, so yeah.
It depends on how you position yourself with the brand that you're building.
Yeah, I think you need to basically plan no matter what. Like being a creator is a great thing to have with a brand, but it needs to be able to survive outside of that regardless. And that means it has its own voice, it has its own story, and you're like merely a character in that story. And that's like an exercise I encourage people to do all the time too, is like think about like if your brand is a TV show exercise where it's like, all right, who are all the characters in it? Like who are the voices that are on camera? Who are the people that the emails come from? Who are the people might know when they look the company up? Those are your characters. Okay, wherever we film, wherever we have things on like that, those are your sets. Okay, then we have our storyline, like, all right, what are our events? What are our launches? What are major cultural items? And then you have like actual plot, like, okay, what are our enemies? Are we positioning against toxic skincare? Are we positioning against ill-fitting jeans? Are we whatever? And then who's our friends? Who do we collaborate with? That's like a really interesting way to like actually look at what you have like as a brand. And if you're a creator, you're just one thing. you may be one of those sets, maybe one of those voices, but it needs to be built out bigger than you. And like, and as an example, like looking at Rhode, like Hailey Bieber's brand, like you go on their vlog, she's on there, but there's other big makeup creators like right next to it. There's other known models like right in there. She is a central point of the brand, but there are characters that are built around it, so it's not just her. And then you see some of the less successful brands that are in that space that are just built around their celebrity, I feel don't have the same resonance.
What makes TikTok Shop a good platform for creator-led brands?
Yeah, because if you understand TikTok and you do a video that rips, you can basically pass the same brief to like 100 other creators if you're connected. So like if you are specifically a TikTok creator and you know how to make good TikToks and you can recruit other creators to do it, TikTok Shop is wonderful. Just because it's like an ecosystem that other people don't understand, so you have like actual advantage.
That was pretty good. We just like rip through those.
That's good. I feel bad like talking in front of that. I feel like I might want to get to the point where there's some back and forth.
We'll get into some open Q&A. Who has questions?
Hey. Zapata here. Nice to meet y'all. You said that Hans Laurie was one of your most successful Cut 30 students, and it's probably because of consistency. So I just want to know, take it back to the early days of your first 100 videos. What kept you to be so consistent?
I think I've always felt that there's some other there's celebrities and people that say this, but like if you want to do anything, you do it like for X amount of time. So I always look at that. Like I've been learning to sketch recently. Like I've been trying to do a sketch a day, and like I fell off after like 45 days. And if I'd done 100, I probably would be good at it, And so I just always am looking at like, what is that time threshold or that thing to do? And I feel like there's just a human nature to it. And the biggest answer to that was like time blocking, right? Like when I was first doing videos and I was working, I was doing my videos at basically like 9:30 every night, and I wouldn't go to bed until they were done. And some were shittier than others, but like I think there's just a human nature of like that amount of reps. Like I look at Cut 30 people in particular, like the people that don't stop are all the people that like ended up where they wanted to go.
Yeah, what did you say before? You were like, you need to cross like 100 videos or something.
Yeah, like what I look at to like 1,000 videos kind of gets you anywhere you want in life. I feel like in terms of like you want a massive change in your life, like look 1,000 days down the line. But people are always looking at, because virality, we're so obsessed with virality, people are always looking at like, oh, I can change my life like tomorrow. But when you really look at like the consistency of getting, slowly building your way up to 5,000 or 10,000 views in your niche over the course of 2.5 years will like also radically shift like where your life is.
Hi, my name is Jack. I just want to start out with saying I owe so much to you. Basically, you gave me my career in creative direction.
Fire.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I freaking love what I do. Thank you. I wrote this down because obviously I'm nervous, but I just wanted to say, what role does vulnerability play when it comes to building your personal brand? And how do you manage being authentic without feeling too overexposed?
Yeah, so I think it's important to like actually talk through real challenges and things that come up. Yeah, like I think there's a split between like your personal life, like like I'm married, I have kids. I don't show much of that like online because I don't want to like have that level of scrutiny. Like some people do, that's totally fine. That's just where I decided to take that. But when it comes to like vulnerability, the whole point of like being a creator, especially like a value-driven creator, is you are showing people either somewhere in the experience that they're parallel to. Like there's a lot of people that are all like, if you're a junior art director and you follow another junior art director, you're starting to learn about what their experience looks like. And then a lot of people follow a degree or two up. Like a lot of people that want to be a creative director or a director of marketing, whatever, will follow kind of my content. And I think it's really important to show them the ups and downs of like what that journey looks like, without like necessarily pushing them off. But I think it's like important to actually share that because that's why people will go through it. But the way I like to look at it is I'm really focused on sharing ideas. Like sometimes I'll do other content, but it's like, what is something you're thinking critically about or comes up in conversation that's interesting to other people, and like walk through that. And it's not like you never have to then go into vulnerable content or talk about the wrong things, but you're just presenting a platform for people to think about. I think that's where I feel is most resonant for creators is like you scroll through so many of these things and maybe you laugh or you're entertained or you bookmark something, but anything that really like makes you think critically or like has such a power to it. And so I think that like an idea is by nature, the fact where you're admitting that you're exploring something or thinking about something is like very vulnerable, in my opinion. And I think the key thing to think about is that no matter where you're at in your arc, there are people that are like a step below that who would love to know and see what that looks like. And it's really positive to just be out there sharing it.
Hi, I'm Alice. Thank you so much. Really interesting insights. So what resonated with me was when you talked about halo retailers, especially for luxury brands, jewelry, accessories. How do you think about Amazon and Walmart in terms of brand elevation?
We were just talking about this. I think Amazon ecosystem is like changing quite a bit. I mean, we work with a lot of Amazon brands. We have a lot of conversations with luxury businesses that are thinking about coming onto Amazon. I think in 6 months, dynamic changes entirely. They acquired Saks. They're doing a lot of things in terms of how they're, merchandising that inventory. There are a lot of luxury brands coming on that platform. Now, if you're a startup, does that mean, if you're a luxury brand startup, like, does that mean you go onto Amazon immediately? I don't necessarily think so. I think actually probably the Halo retailer is the way where you want to show up. It's very easy for a heritage luxury brand to go onto Amazon. They've already done all of the work in terms of building up the brand. I think there is still, a lot of validity in not being on Amazon or in that ecosystem as a luxury business. You need to weigh that though with the fact that 60% of e-commerce purchases in the US happens through Amazon. So it's just a big pie.
And I look at it like going into Walmart or any big box retail, you're not going to be able to control price, which makes it really hard to do for luxury. They're going to do a rollback. Your other vendors are going to see it, and you're going to lose control of your pricing in the market. So I think it's very hard to take premium goods into that market unless you have some level of leverage with them, which most brands don't. But Amazon's almost the opposite. Because what I hate about Amazon from a luxury brand standpoint is that your customer is going to go on there and search it. There are hundreds of thousands of searches for Tiffany's and Louis Vuitton and anything you could expect on Amazon every day. And you don't control that experience. Some gray market seller, some like other account, your consumer is now going through a journey with associations that you don't want them to have. So even if you don't have all of your products on there, I actually do feel that like for a luxury brand that's reached a certain standing, you want to at least say, hey, we have just our fragrance on there, or we have something, so we are controlling what happens with our brand experience. I actually think is a really important thing when you think holistically about how your brand is seen in the market, because so many people actually search on there.
Yeah, and there are tons of resellers. So I think controlling the narrative is really important to Oren's point. Once you get to a certain size, you can kind of own the real estate and make sure no one's reselling and control what the customer sees. Is that covering everything?
Yeah, that covers it. Really helpful. Thank you so much.
Hey, what's up? Lennox here. Quick question back to that paid versus organic. Given the modern day algorithms on Instagram, do you have a rule of thumb split between the two?
Not necessarily, but I would say I would not be really going into paid until you've maxed out what you're doing on organic. The nice part about paid is so say for instance you're getting your cadence of your brand, you're running 3 posts a week, 5 posts a week, whatever it is. You have so much advantage to go run those on paid, from the beginning, to get them more reach. And especially once you get once Meta really learns your brand and your audience and your ASC campaigns really get humming, where it knows who your target is. I would just be, I would basically say anything that you can do, as long as you have the inventory to do it, I'd be trying to run through Meta, and if it hits its numbers, you keep it. And then when you start to need more creative is when that stuff isn't enough. When you're hey, we could actually spend more. And if you're working with any goods Meta ads person, they'll be telling you, being hey, this organic creative is doing really well. If I just had this and this and this, I could probably get to this next level. And so you really end up in this scaling conversation. But I don't think it's as much as a ratio as as soon as you have someone solid enough on your team to run Meta, I'd be putting as much as performs through it.
I also think it's product dependent too. So depending on what type of business you have, people might be, if it's demand based where people are searching for the product, there might be a valid case for you to start investing into some sort of paid search. What is it? Apparel is very visual. So,
yeah. And I'd just be the apparel brands are scaling off those ads, right? And you'll see really quick, it may not work. And so you're all right, actually, guess what? My organic sells really well. I can't for the life of me sell on ads. Look, I have that exact scenario. I can sell a ton of my shoe bags on there. I sell pretty well on shirts. None of the other stuff moves on ads. So, okay, great. I can scale those. I can run campaigns. I can move more. The other stuff I need to focus on organic. But that's the balance that you end up in.
Ritz here. Where do you see LinkedIn as a social platform in 5 to 10 years, now that they're ramping up on social, on
we love LinkedIn.
Yeah,
short form video.
Love it. Big LinkedIn people here.
The cursed LinkedIn. No, look, LinkedIn is great. I don't know if they'll ever have a sophisticated algorithm, right? They have a dumb algorithm. That's fine. Where you look at these brands that come with a sophisticated way to deliver you exactly what you want. But there will be, until a replacement comes along, there are going to be people that basically, it feels like work to be on LinkedIn. And it's kind of okay if you're at the office to be on LinkedIn. So they are consuming on there passively. So it's just a natural channel. I think if you are doing any service-based work, or you're a pro or an expert, and you're an agency, it is probably your number one channel. Like it is an excellent channel to be growing on. If you are a brand, I'm actually really bullish on LinkedIn. Because the last company I worked at, we had one of those guys, and you may know the type who like posts everything on LinkedIn. And at the beginning, I was like, man, this guy, he posted stuff before it's even supposed to be out. Like, what are we doing? But then I started to notice, I go to trade shows, everyone knows him. He was attached to everyone in that industry. People knew a ton about the company because he would share everything. He'd share our ads, our influencer deals, our latest, like the latest posts on our consumer social were all just on his LinkedIn. And you're like, oh, he's actually reached a B2B audience like very actively. And like we have retailers that come in from it. And so I actually think that I'm a huge proponent of sharing your every win or every piece of consumer content, like having someone from your brand be part of that experience, I actually think is valid as a B2B strategy to get to retailers, to get to people in your industry. I actually think is a really good strategy. I don't think it's the anchor, but I think it's solid. And then in 5 to 10 years, I think it's just where it was like 5 to 10 years ago. Like LinkedIn is there, it's mid, and that's fine, but you can like achieve goals on it and you keep going. And I look at that like, I don't know, I have like 15,000 LinkedIn followers, but like most of those are actual like connections from like time. And so you start to look at like those are real human beings and people in a way that like people don't abandon that profile the way they start a new Instagram or a new TikTok. So I actually think it kind of has some pretty remarkable staying power when in terms of like I have real people here that do real things. And I do think people should share their consumer content, like share your best Instagram posts, share the posts of the influencers for your brand. I look at it as bottom of funnel as a creator where a lot of people would feel weird about messaging me on Instagram, and I probably wouldn't even see the DM because DMs there are like terrible. But they are very comfortable reaching out on LinkedIn about like a brand deal or about like a partnership because it just feels more professional, and then they can show their accolades versus a private profile with a pic of like them and their wife, right? And so I do think that there's that dot connection where if they see you active on there and posting, that's actually really valuable. And I've noticed that a lot since I've been more active on it, that like business crosses over.
For me, LinkedIn is, if you're in B2B, LinkedIn's essential. If you're a good content creator and you're in B2B, you can absolutely crush LinkedIn from an impression perspective, and it can be your entire lead generation engine. I also think if you're a founder of a product business and you have a niche or an audience that's professional working people, there's a reason to be on LinkedIn creating content as well as X. And I think it's not something that you're going to be able to measure, not something that's going to have like direct attribution, but I see a lot of really strong founder brands blow up on X, blow up on LinkedIn. People start talking about those businesses. It just becomes like really strong top of funnel for the brand.
But I also say just remember, you don't have to do everything. If something doesn't work or you have no traction on it and you feel like you're wasting time, but one thing is working, just ignore that other stuff. Like you can succeed and do stuff on any of these that you want to, but I'll go into all these brands where they're like, well, we're doing great in this, but we don't have a TikTok strategy or our Twitter's out. It's like, hey, guess what? You can't concentrate on everything. No good marketing strategy does until you have infinite resources, which is higher than where you are. Like, don't ever feel bad focusing on what works.
Yeah, there are layers to everything.
What's going on, man? Shout out my man, Caleb.
How you doing?
Doing great, man.
Back with another question. Okay, so one thing I've seen following you is that you are present and putting out content everywhere. So LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. So I think the thing that I'm curious about, what is like the behind the scenes of that? Like what's the system? What's the team that's allowing you to put out so much content on a weekly basis?
I want to shout out Brody, who's floating around here somewhere. But yeah, so there is like a team. It's not just me. I did a short form video a day myself. Basically, that was something I was achievable myself while working. Now there is someone who shoots for YouTube, someone who edits for YouTube, someone who also helps edit short form. So basically one shooter, one editor, like at any given time. And then like a team working on ideas. Like I have a very active management team, Clayton and I, who do are feedbacking a lot of ideas of like what we think people are talking about or what's good for a newsletter that becomes what's good in a video. So it's definitely not like a one person thing. But because it's like, if you keep doing the same stuff again and again, things drift off. You kind of feel that constant pressure as a creator to like get better or do better ideas or try new stuff out. And that kind of requires a team. And then with that, like having management, they do brand deals, they do like negotiation, they do paperwork. I don't think about any of that stuff ever, which again, it may seem for some people that like, oh, that wouldn't be worth it, or oh, it's not that much time. Like everything is time, especially when you're idea driven, because you realize, if you're in so many meetings, you need like space. You need this like, I need that 2-hour window to like figure something out in my head is like actually really hard to schedule and like crucial to do. And like every time you divert that for an email or an invoice, like you're losing that momentum. And I found that to be really important.
Hey, Tyler here. So I actually had a question. There's a lot of things changing very quickly in this country right now. One of them has to do with tariffs and like this de minimis tax that they're doing now. And so you think about Shein and Temu, they kind of like dominated that very low price range. And I'm wondering, like going back to the Amazon conversation a little bit, like, do you see any sort of opportunities or lanes or seams that come from that because they're not going to be able to price as competitively? Like, does brand come in there? Is that going to change the nature of some of this?
I think people will still want cheap stuff. I think it'll just be a little bit like it was prior, where they're buying that on Amazon from people that are thus bringing it in bulk versus arbing shipping it direct. But I'm curious what you think. You're kind of a little bit deeper inside the Amazon
Yeah, I
space.
think there's definitely like price elasticity concerns with both Amazon and TikTok Shop. If you have a high price product on Amazon, if you built up the brand, you can really succeed. And like if the demand is there, it really works. But it's definitely still a factor. And I think that's the case with e-commerce as well. Like if you have a high price product and you're brand new, like it's always going to be harder than if you're the cheapest option. You know, I think if you approach the business, you know, in a logical way, and you build up the brand, like you can make anything happen, so long as you're not selling like luxury motorcycles on Amazon.
The global supply chain is a complicated beast. And I think the hardest part about this is we don't understand what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or a week later. And so something I always encourage is like, you can't think about anything that's happening day to day, like you're just going to get lost in any of that. You have to try to think like, let those things go and just focus on where you're at. But yeah, it is a super weird time for what anything costs to make or to be done. And everything that you do try to make in the US with like certain, with some certain exceptions is like significantly more complicated and harder. And one thing I think about when I look at like, hey, is there opportunity there? Is I do think there's opportunity for material to like land in the US. Like one of the strengths why people make so much stuff in India or China is like access to fabric and material. Same thing with Europe that just doesn't exist here in the same way. And I think the ability to have that on hand, if there ends up being like, say, like a larger apparel industry in the US, it's like an interesting macro opportunity, but I'm not going to act like I know enough to really bet on it.
I think like the right move is like just to diversify the supply chain. If you're manufacturing things in China right now and, you know, you see what's kind of coming down the pike with the administration, then like I think it's in your best interest to figure out how to diversify off of that. Very similar to what happened during COVID, like when supply chains just got fully cut off. But yeah, it's going to have implications in terms of like what you're going to be able to price and how expensive things are going to get. But every other brand's dealing with that too. And we have an eyewear business they manufacture in China, and you know it's going to affect the MSRP of the price. So we're looking at different types of manufacturers.
I want to talk a little bit about diversification and picking up a niche. I think you talk a lot about product market fit, and as creatives, we like doing a lot of stuff, and you've talked about doing a lot of projects and these projects never being to the point where you want them to be. So I'm also in a similar spot where I have like multiple areas I want to tackle. And at the same time, I hear everybody saying like, oh, you got to niche down. Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's an anecdote that's probably true that like if you are doing 3 or 4 things and you want to go specialize in one thing, you'll probably end up doing a lot better at it, make a lot more money at it. The people that do that, like their brains work in a certain way that some people's don't. Like mine does not work like that. I can't. If I focus on one thing, I will get like 6 good hours out of the day. If I try to do 5 things, I will probably get 12 good hours out of the day. It's just how my brain works. You kind of have to like see where you're at and admit it. But I do recommend that like if you don't know what it's like to go all in on a single thing and be like intensely passionate about it for an extended period of time, you should like experience that as much as you humanly can before deciding you want to be the person that does multiple things, I feel like. And the real trigger for that, like why I'm so bullish on like product market fit and things like that is if you go put your energy, all your energy as a creative into a thing and it keeps stumbling and it keeps failing and it doesn't work, and like that's probably because the product wasn't right. But if you put all of your energy into that and it starts to work and it really starts to move and you begin to see like the real power of like all of your energy and then something that actually resonates, it's kind of like the best feeling possible. And so I think like that is something like worth chasing and achieving. And then once you've gone through that once or twice and seen the ups and the downs of both, you can decide more about like where you want to be long term. But I do think like especially at the beginning, people really need to really understand in their lives what it's like to like be all in on something.
I'm sure we've all seen the Mr. Beast Colin and Samir clip about CPG and creator-led brands and how it's a really difficult time for them to last, more than a couple of years. So I'm curious how the decision makers in your company, you, potentially your management, decided to build a apparel business, a product, versus doing a really high touch partnership with an existing brand?
Yeah, and so a couple notes. So if you haven't seen the video she's talking about there, so Colin and Samir, who are like big YouTubers, were interviewing Mr. Beast, and he was basically like, hey, CPG is really hard and creators shouldn't do it. And he's kind of not wrong, because he's going through that same fallacy that I talked about earlier, where it's like, Mr. Beast was like, you know what, it's actually way easier for me to make like $2 million, like saving 48 orphans from a train or whatever he does, than like actually selling more chocolate. And that is true, and he's dealing with that. And like, it is actually way harder to make a successful CPG brand than it will ever be to succeed in content. So I would say, like, if you are a creator and you want to be in CPG, then like having something that you really love and resonate with, and you'd be like, you know what, like I found this rare hazelnut in wherever, and it's going to bring, you know, peace to people with fibromyalgia, whatever it is, like you like, this is my thing. I love it. Actually, it would be hot if that happened. Like then go all in on it. But if you're just being like, hey, I'm doing this because like this is what I feel my next arc as a creator is, you're right, it's probably not a good idea. But for me, like going into apparel, like I have designed for apparel brands. I design stuff. I am not doing this like as a big moneymaker. I'm doing it because I like to do it and I want to make content about it, and I'm like excited about it. I don't need like another start some like X business or Y business. I think it's important to like admit those things. Like I'm in a period of my life where I like to really admit why I'm doing something. Like, am I doing it because like there's ego behind it? And, like that's okay, but you should know it. Am I doing it because I think it's going to make me a lot of money? Like, okay, I should admit that and then chase it that way. And this is something I'm just doing because I feel like it's the right thing for me to do that I'm going to be excited about for years. And for certain creators who are in different positions, like if I was, this would be a bad decision for me if I didn't have like a very solid like fiscal scenario. Right. And like I shouldn't be doing that. But as someone who does, like I can make those decisions. You can end up with creators in different places. But I would say that for creators that have not really done businesses before, if you like, and again, or haven't worked in some of those positions, like the last thing you should do is start like an operationally heavy like D2C brand. But where there is opportunity is like partnering. I still think there's a massive opportunity partnering operators with creators, partnering creators with other creators, and like working as groups and stuff. I think online has like siloed us more than ever. Like we're kind of in this era, like the anti-co-founder era, which I like don't believe in at all. Like Clayton, who I run Hyper with, like we didn't even meet until like a month ago, and we've been doing this for like 2 years. He lives in Amsterdam. We met on the internet, and we both like are interested in like each other's like taste and approach, and like I would never have created this business to this level without him involved in it. I don't think he would have ever embarked on something like this without me. I do feel like there's that, like one of the biggest things we're always talking about is like, okay, creator needs to go do this. Like creator needs to have a team of people that are as motivated as them and good at other things that they have an understanding with, which is equally hard in a different way, but I think feels like sets you up for success more than all of that on someone's shoulders.
Yeah, I think the opportunity, like if you're a creator and you have the audience and the distribution, like the positioning just, it seems so right. It just seems so like easy to grasp. But I think the thing that they were talking about in that video is like all of the operational pieces that are downstream from launching a company are super, super complex. I can just tell you anecdotally at the agency, and we work with A-list celebrities and many creators, they are usually the worst run businesses operationally. I will just say that, not calling out any names. And that's not Oren either. Oren is a superhuman in terms of how he runs his stuff. But I just think that's because like the creators, they want to focus on making content and they outsource a lot of the critical operational infrastructure. And like when you're a founder and you're just not in the weeds or know everything that's kind of happening, not in a bad way, but just like from a business perspective, that's tough. I think decision making kind of, gets delegated sometimes not necessarily in the best way.
I also feel like people aren't thinking on a long enough scale. Like I like to look at like I'm not like some huge fan of the Paul brothers, but like they have like deodorant, right? There are these macro level shifts that are happening in culture, especially around like Gen Alpha males. And I mean, I just don't know the female market enough. Maybe the same thing's happening there, but like those kids, like 16 to 18-year-old boys are watching. There's so much streaming. They're watching so much Kai Cenat. They're in these new worlds where they are for no life of them will know what, I'm trying to think of like what a good example is. Like any like existing deodorant brand, they have no resonance. They don't care what their parents bought. The only thing they care about is the brands that are shown to them via these channels they have, which adults just like purely aren't on. They don't understand what's happening at like the Kai Cenat Thanksgiving, right? And I think that how brands are going to be made and how major like Procter & Gamble level like conglomerates and the brands under them are going to change from that generation who just is like completely unaware of this existing brand infrastructure is really important. And I think that for someone like Mr. Beast, he's like already bored by his businesses, obviously. But someone like Jake or Logan Paul or whoever's running their businesses behind it, if they just stick with whatever their like W deodorant is for the next like 10 years and let it ride. Like they may have that exact place on the shelf that used to be Old Spice, and it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add to this is I think the creator economy is so nascent, like it's still developing so much. So I think there are good outlets that are going to come out of, you know, a lot of the innovation that's happening in the CPG community. Like if you're a creator and you want to focus on just creating content, I think there are going to be partnership outlets that make a lot of sense. We have a client at the agency called Infinite Garden. They're launching just influencer supplement businesses, and they have a great infrastructure set up. So I think there's like ways to divide the pie, I think, in healthy ways that make sense. And I think you're going to continue to see that. I just don't think it's like 100% been perfected yet.
I should have just launched a new tropic, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you still can. Yeah. You still can. Who else? Oh, we got one right here.
I kind of a follow-up question. So to both of you, actually. It's a new year, good time to reflect. And I'm curious, what is something that you want to start this year and something that you're stopping this year, whether it's with your business, your content, or a hobby? Start and stop.
I mean, like the content stuff is super timely for me. I just started a vlog, which I'm excited about. We were filming today. We haven't launched anything yet, but like, it just gets me energized, you know? Just haven't had a camera around. It's been good. And then stopped drinking, actually. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Which has been also incredible, I will just say, for the business.
I can't think of anything I'm stopping, but I'm obsessed with streaming currently, just because I'm really interested in like this whole like second screen idea, like the fact that people will watch TV and something else is on, or the fact that there's so many kids now that will just have a stream, like a live stream of whoever, like the FaZe Clan or whoever, like on in the background, and like how that consumption is going to work. And so I've been like trying to focus way more on streaming this year and what that looks like. I think we just have whole generations of people that have like something else in their ear, and the podcast era is like inherently not as interesting as something actually happening on screen. So I'm like thinking about ways to integrate that. We had one back there.
Thank you. My name is Andrea. I am a content creator with a full-time job in digital marketing. So I've been creating content like consistently for about 3 years and have an audience like around 100K level. So I feel like I've maxed out my personal productivity like to the max. And I'm just wondering like what advice would you give to content creators at this stage? Like from a one-person team and who want to grow the personal brand, maybe expanding to more platforms, potentially building something like more scalable, like a service or product. And also what's your thoughts on like building your own team versus leveraging like talent management agency or something similar? Yeah.
A couple thoughts on that. One is I would encourage you, and I encourage a lot of creators to do this. Like if you say you're posting 5 videos a week or whatever the right thing is, find like 2 slightly easier formats. Like say, hey, I'm going to do carousels to take me half the time, and like cut down like the volume of the time intensive stuff. And I'd also look at your growth, like basically what your goals are. If your goal is to keep growing, or versus your goal is to just like keep your audience engaged and try to sell more stuff and just create less. Like I actually think that for a lot of us who like we got momentum because we posted 5-7 times a week, but really our core growth and our sales and stuff are being driven by 1 or 2 of those posts. And so I would say, hey, like test that out for a little while. Like what does either like, hey, I do carousels every other day now, and that makes it a little easier, or I've cut down to like my 2 most impactful styles, and then what does that like enable me to do elsewhere? If you haven't done email, I think email is the most impactful thing like to be on there. Like when I talk about like how content creation means that, you know, I would never have to work a traditional job again. A lot of that comes down to the fact that there's 35,000 people on an email list that like anytime I ever want to sell anything or offer a service or do whatever, I can hit up. So I would really focus on the longevity of building an email list. I wouldn't necessarily recommend management unless you have like more deals coming in that are taking more time for you to handle. If you do have that and you're like, this is actually taking up a lot of my time, I would get management on that like immediately. They'll get more money out of it than you will yourself, and it'll take the time off your plate. But if it's like 1 or 2 things every week, I wouldn't think about that first. And then team really comes down to like, what do you hate to do? What do you procrastinate on? What stops you from those goals, right? Like I am not a video editor. I was editing video for like unknown reasons. And so it was like, that takes me way longer than other people. And so I was like, all right, that's the easiest thing for me to outsource. But for some people that may be good at that, it's like, hey, I need help with X or Y. I would just really focus on those things that you don't like and we're removing those. But for every creator out there, that email list is like by far the most valuable thing that will stay with you beyond platforms. And if you don't know what to email them, like email them your top content once a month, because not everyone sees everything that goes in the algorithm. It's a really easy win.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I work in B2B ad tech. I know Jackson really well from Darkroom. We've done content with them before. My question is on the topic of LinkedIn, what do you think are the biggest opportunities for B2B content and also B2B creators this year and next year?
The way I'm thinking about LinkedIn for us is like just using a consumer playbook for LinkedIn. With the agency, for instance, bringing people into life at the agency, but actually like making it pretty exciting, mixed in with all of the thought leadership that we do regarding, you know, brands to watch, work that we're putting out, the state of digital marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So just bringing a more brand focused lens. The other thing that's really not done well on LinkedIn is video. And that's why Jackson's content rips, and, you know, we're very bullish on what we're putting out on LinkedIn. So honestly, like, I think Oren's playbook like really does well on LinkedIn. So just short form video.
I think the big opportunity, the people I see do really well on there is like LinkedIn kind of replaces business news outlets. People don't pay for, they're not paying for Business Insider, or they don't pay for Ad Age or Ad Week. How can you replace that? Like in your niche, like if you're a designer, like how would you provide the things that someone would have to like go to a paywalled site to like get insight on? I think is a really easy one to win, because I eventually think like basically all websites and news media websites, all that same info is just going to be gotten on social media. And if you are ahead of the curve of that in your niche, then you have an opportunity to win. And I think LinkedIn's an easy place to do that.
I would agree. Thank you guys so much. This was incredible. Really appreciate everyone coming at. Thank you, Oren.
But thank you for having me.
We're going to stay here for a little bit. I think we have like 20 more minutes with Shopify. So if you want to come up, ask questions, feel free.